talk a long time because I want you to get right into this. I have a chart showing you how Golden State scored. It's game 2, as I explained when you get to the chart. But I want you to see the chart. It's much more important than anything that I have to say. So, because that's where the meat of this is. So, please, let's go right to the chart. Okay, I'd like to start by going over how I did this, how I got this information, and it's only in game 2. That does not bother me because we've done other things with Golden State, and the only difference in this breakdown was that I kept track of cuts very carefully and where they came from and whether they made, they scored points. So basically what I counted as a cut for this particular study was a cut that resulted in a shot. In other words, there were a lot of cuts that nobody passed them the ball to, for example, or they didn't take the shot and they threw it out or something like that. I didn't count those. So these were improvised cuts, each one of them, depending on, it didn't make any difference where they came, whether it was in their fast break, their transition, their breakdown, or their plays, or the screen rolls. I counted them in that area. So, as I said, this was game 2. The score ended up Golden State won 110-77, and that had a little bit of significance as to the results, and I'll explain that as we go along here. But basically, it was a good game until about the beginning of the fourth quarter. Then Golden State just completely dominated them, and it became just a garbage time at that point. First of all, I'd like to show you the difference between where they got the points. And I use the term third element because in Basketball Talk Pro, you should be aware of what I'm talking about with the third element. But basically, the third element is fast break, transition, breakdown, and no plays. These are unstructured, and most of the time, and I'm sure I could say 100% of the time, they were not practiced. They were players going on their own. They were playing like playground ball or pickup ball. And so that's what I mean by the third element. On the word sets is what I mean in all plays. Could be an out of bounds play. It could include screen and roll. It could, I define pretty clearly plays that were not screen and rolls, though they could have screen and rolls within the play. But end of quarter, every type of structured setup, and I just call them sets to cover everything. So let's look at that first. In the third element, there were 63 possessions that came up that they either were in breakdown, no play, transition, or fast break. And so there were 63 of them in this game. They scored 77 points in those 63 possessions. They had an OER in the third element only of 1.22. Outstanding. And this is the thing that has interested me, intrigues me about Golden State, is their ability to operate effectively in these situations. I'm hoping that they change the NBA, that the NBA coaches see the effectiveness that this team has with it, and goes away from that boring pick and roll in the middle and on the side, and the traditional NBA plays that create nothing. And I'm gonna show you, even with Golden State, they didn't. In their sets, they had. I'm sorry, I made a mistake here. I'm going to correct it right now if I can. It should be 53 possessions and 30 points. But the OER is correct, 0.57. So they had 53 times they ran their sets, almost as many times as the third element, and they scored 30 points off of them, which gave them an OER of 0.57. So you can see where their effectiveness is. I mean, I don't know what more you need to know. This is where they're effective. This is where they're good. This is where they're getting their points in that third element. But there is something about the sets I want to point out to you later. Now, this means that 72% of their scoring, I go through this, it's just amazing to me. No matter what games I pick or what games I do, it ends up very close to 70% of the scoring is done in the third element, the unstructured area, and for the most part, and I think maybe all, nobody coaches it. And that's, to me, a real crime that they don't help their players to have some type of group improvisation, which is not taking place now. A lot of it is isolation, one man plays. It is not run, but I will say that Golden State does a good job with it. And only 28% of their total scoring was done off the sets. 53 possessions. They only scored on 28% of their points scored. Total points were scored in sets. Pretty pathetic when you think about it. Now, here's the difference that this particular study was. I kept track of the cuts. Those of you who've taken measuring basketball performance, I just want you to know I used the form that I show you in that course, but I broke it down from that form into this area. In the third element, they scored 77 points in the third element. 16 of those 77 were from cuts, as I defined it. So 21% of their points were in the third element were scored on cuts. If synergy is correct, and we're in our definition of points scored on cuts, I have never seen any team in synergy get above 10% on their cuts. That'll show you when we get through with this how effective Golden State is. In their sets, they scored 30 points. 12 of them were from cuts. And I'm going to make a point about that in just a little bit. So 40% of the points that were scored on their sets were scored on improvised cuts. And I want to explain that. They run a play. If the play breaks down, then it goes to the third element. But what Golden State was doing, and very well, was they were running their play and making an improvised cut, and not part of the play, but still in the play. It was a difficult way to grade this film. Golden State, I've done a lot of them, so I'm now catching on to their plays and things like that. But this was an eye opener to me. How many times they cut not part of the play, but a play that the player themselves make up. And all of a sudden, they're getting open. And most of those, I can't. I think if I got this right, there were 6 baskets scored on those cuts, and almost every one of them were layups. It was, and that's why they had such a high level. I think on the cuts that they made off of improvised cuts in within the play, I think they were 5 for 6. So most of them were layups. Now in the game totals of the 107 points, I could not account for 3 points, and I didn't. This is the right score. This is missing 3 points. I, sometimes in those games they interview people and they show people on the bench and stuff, and you miss a little bit. There was one part, and I remember it, when I knew that Golden State had scored. I had no idea how they scored or whether it was a 3-point shot or whatever it was. So, but the of those 107 is what I worked with. 26% of them. That's 1 out of 4. Now, when most teams are doing 8, 9, and 10%, they're getting 1 out of 4 of their points are scored with cuts. And here's what I wanted to point out. At the end of the third period, the number of cuts, points scored, were 31% of their total score. But at the beginning of the fourth period, they just blew them out. And now you had people coming off the bench. And those guys did not want to pass. They wanted to shoot. And so there wasn't one cut that scored or got a shot in the fourth period. And that's why this is lower than it had been in the real game. So I want to go through these notes because I feel they're really important. I told you about cuts for shots taken and made off of improvised cuts. That's a key word. Each basket scored on a cut required a pass, thus an assist. Jerry Sloan pointed this out to me about their ability to pass, and he's right. They were seeing the cutting man and getting the ball to him. They made good passes, not spectacular passes, but seeing the man and getting the ball to him right away. They missed some cuts, but overall they were very good at seeing. And see, this is what teamwork is. When all of your shots, all of these points were scored on assists. Somebody had to pass that ball to the cutter. They have a team concept in what they're doing. Golden State moves bodies instead of ball movement. All those guys on TV who are, so proud of ball movement, Golden State doesn't do a lot of that. They move bodies, and then what creates moving bodies is this: they had immense movement in their plays, created scramble. Basically, within 4 or 5 seconds of every play they ran, they had the defense, regardless of how physical Cleveland was trying to play, they had them scrambled. And that created opportunities that weren't in the plays or weren't cuts. For example, drives. They get a lot of drives. I should keep track of that sometime. But basically, the drives come somewhere in the play when they're cutting back and forth and around and every other thing, and all of a sudden that defense loses track and they're playing their man real tight and creates great openings for the team. Well, I don't want to go any farther with this. This is a great a great thing to see for coaches. I don't. I would tell each one of you, begin to, regardless of what you see and hear at clinics, begin to coach your team, train your team, help them learn how to improvise and how to make good cuts. It'll open up doors for you. I can tell you that from my own personal experience. And I started out running plays like everybody else did, but I never felt satisfied with the results I was getting. I never got the results I wanted until the day that I decided to run freelance basketball. Well, that's it, and hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you learned something from this. Thank you very much. Well, there you have a real look at Golden State, or we could do the same thing with many teams. But I don't think you'd find a team that cuts like Golden State does. And I wanted to show you the strength of that. As I say when I'm talking on the chart, I really urge you to look at this aspect of basketball. I'm hoping that we have a completely new wave of offensive approaches, getting away from some of the things that I see, especially in the NBA, but even in college. So take a good look at it and think it out. It may be very helpful to you. We'll see you next time, and thanks for watching.